That's some good volume? All right.
Now I feel like I can start.
Wow.
I'm going to start off the show by apologizing that David is not here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is Cross Politic. I'm here with Pastor Toby, the Water Boy, John Green, Heather Scott, Scott Herndon. Too many Scotts in the room. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to taper down a little bit.
You got kind of faint.
Faded out? Is that
You got kind of faint.
Did I?
I don't know, but David, you're going to fix this.
He'll fix that.
In post-production. You're welcome. You're welcome. We love you.
As you guys can see, this is going to be an Idaho show today.
Right.
Although, you guys don't know this, I know this, but John is from Texas.
Oh, no.
So the promised land?
No.
Yes, sir. Hook 'em horns.
Hey! Watch that, see? You're welcome, Chuck. You're welcome. That's me. I'm taking care of you.
That's great.
Hey, we're so grateful to have a brand new sponsor.
Yes.
Bringing you this show.
They're a
And
year-long corporate sponsor, which is very special to us.
Samaritan Ministries is a healthcare sharing ministry with over 250,000 Christians that care for one another's needs, from broken bones to cancer, pregnancies to organ transplants, all without the use of insurance. Let's be honest, talking about health insurance is not something anyone really likes to do. It can be confusing with lots of jargon, plus who really knows what's actually going on to take care of. That's why Samaritan Ministries is a healthcare option people should consider. It's
Amen.
not insurance. Actually, that just sort of makes me happy right there.
Yeah.
It's
That alone.
It's just Christians sending financial gifts to other Christians when there's a medical need. Plus caring for one another spiritually through prayer and encouragement. Christians can do that with Samaritan Ministries because they know when an illness or injury happens, Samaritan members have their backs. My wife and I have been members of Samaritan Ministries for a number of years, and it's been a huge blessing.
And what I love about Samaritan Ministries, it really does bring down the cost of healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a crazy solution for actually bringing down the cost.
I am going to interrupt you and say we are members as well.
Oh!
And David here had about $70,000 in medical expenses a couple of years ago that were
Wow.
covered by Samaritan Ministries families.
And Christian families helped bear the burden.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's like what the church is supposed to do.
Absolutely.
And,
Surprise, it works. It actually brings down economic problems, too.
That's fantastic. So if you'd like to learn more about how you can be part of this ministry, helping each other with healthcare, visit SamaritanMinistries.org and hit /crosspolitic. That would be really handy and dandy.
Help us, help them, help you. Go to that website. Can you follow it? Lastly, as you guys have we've had tons of club members sign up for December because they put in the code. David hates this slide here.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Because it's so exciting.
All one word.
David's like,
all
what are you doing?
lowercase. You put in that code and you get 1 free month of club membership for free. But we still
Stop it, Aaron!
we Wait, you hit the wrong one.
Ridiculous.
Hey, that's better. All right, that makes a little more sense.
I'm trying.
And we'll still send you a Fight Laugh Feast pint. You're making this difficult on me, Toby.
That's an idea.
And it's the studio audience can't hear anything that's going on in our heads.
Yeah.
And so they just hear. So we'll still send you a pint
wrong
and then
with
whatever
you people?
coffee cup or t-shirt that you guys sign up with that level. And that's still with 1 free month.
Yeah.
And here's the more exciting slide. The more exciting slide is Merry Christmas. It's Advent.
That's the Christian one.
That's right.
That's the other one. What was the other one? The Scrooge one?
Did I have that one?
Just that plain black and white. It's like Merry Christmas.
I like it.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
We're really
It's
excited.
understated about a big month.
No.
Okay. All right. We got to get into some intros here because we got 3 guests in
All
the
right,
studio.
man. Yeah.
And they're wondering what's going on.
Yeah.
What they walked into.
Right to the right of me, I've got Scott Herndon. The most important thing you need to know about him is that he was a skydiver.
And you need to take me sometime. I'm serious.
Well, it's been a while.
The only thing I've
When's the
done
last
is
time-
bungee jumping. Well, maybe we need to go with a friend that's been recently, but I want to go with you.
When's the last time you jumped?
Actually, it has been a couple of decades.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so maybe it's not the most
But it was
important thing.
492 times.
Oh.
8 hours in free fall.
You also...
8
you were
hours.
an auditor?
You added that up. 8 hours of
Well,
free
we
fall.
do because we keep a logbook
Yeah.
like a pilot keeps a
8
logbook.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
How's it feel to have fallen for 8 hours?
Well, you're not just falling. You're flying. It would actually be really boring past the first or second time. if that's all you did.
Hours. Hours, right. Also, you were an auditor for a little while?
I was.
Is that right? And you're a builder.
Yes.
You still build homes?
I do, yeah.
And a jail chaplain.
Mm-hmm.
And now an advocate for the unborn. You and your wife Arlene and family are here.
They are here. They're
whole
actually
families right here.
over here.
They're in the studio
And
today
there.
with children ranging in age from 6 to 23.
Correct.
Did I get that
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Your bio was only 2 years old. So just
You need to update your bio here.
we asked their ages a minute ago.
Yeah.
So thanks, Scott, for joining us again. You've been on the show before.
I have.
People probably remember your beautiful face. John Green is also with us in the studio.
My Texan, my bro from Texas. Thank you.
John and his wife Elizabeth have been married for almost 41 years. Is that accurate? Is that true?
That's almost 41 years.
Okay,
correct.
all right.
Praise God.
4 children, 10 grandchildren, most of whom live in Kootenai County. John runs a private law practice and is currently a member of the Idaho State Legislature representing District 2B.
We might need to talk to John about some lawyer stuff here at Cross Politics.
And you're now, because that wasn't enough, you're also running for county sheriff?
That's correct.
Okay.
Ooh, how many people are running for county sheriff right now?
I think there's 5 in right now.
Wow.
So far. There may be more.
That's a good crowd, huh?
It is, yeah. The more the merrier.
And
Yeah.
we are also very thankful to have a lady in the studio this morning. You are originally from Ohio, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm wondering how old this bio is. So I'm interested. Bring it on.
You and your husband, Andrew, who's also in the studio today, have been living in North Idaho for the last 18 years.
22.
20. Oh, it's 4 years old.
Wow. Well, before politics, Heather was a small business owner, a professional aquatic biologist.
Yes.
That's still true.
Yes.
Okay. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in biology. You are also the District 1 Idaho State Representative.
District 1A, yes.
1A, okay. And in 2019, you and John introduced the Idaho Abortion Human Rights Act. And we've talked with you about this on the show. I think we talked with Scott some as well. And so that's the point of having you all on today. Is that's what this show is all about. We want to talk about ending abortion in Idaho and then talk about a number of kind of related topics
Issues.
and subjects. So,
Really, before we get there, we have one more introduction here.
We do?
Yeah, we do.
You didn't tell me about
Because Joshua and Christina are in the studio and it's their anniversary.
Oh.
They came from Tennessee to celebrate their anniversary with Cross Politics.
Some people go to Hawaii for their anniversary.
Wow.
These dedicated folks come to watch a live recording of a Cross Politics show.
Yeah. So thank you. They're also Samaritan members.
Samaritan members. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
That's great.
What year?
11.
11 years. Wow. All right. Well, congratulations. I'm going to play you something. I don't know what I'm going to play here.
Message.
Yeah, I played you a preacher organ. There's a preacher organ. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Oh, wow. It just keeps going. For a long... Uh-oh. What do I do?
Minute 15. You may want to cut that off.
I don't know. Stop.
Did you just restart it?
Oh, no.
Did you just restart it?
Yeah.
Just let it run.
I can hardly wait.
Oh, man. Chocolate Knox. I'm sorry.
It's a big
minute
deal.
14.
It's a big deal.
Stop.
There.
Whoa.
There you go.
Oh, man.
All right, let's get into the show.
Oh, that's good. I'll just see the time.
David's gonna be editing this. And
Yeah.
he's just be like,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, make sure you look at these
Yeah,
before
the times.
you press.
Yeah, before I
any
push
of
the
them.
buttons, right? I'll keep it the small numbers. I got you. I got you. That's all right. I'm watching now. I'm learning.
all right,
What you got going on?
let's get into the lay of the land here.
So, maybe Heather, we'll start with you. What's the general lay of the land in terms of abortion legislation in Idaho right now? And just introduce for us and for our audience what legislation you've introduced or you're planning to present here in this coming term in January.
Well, we're still killing babies in Idaho.
Right.
And the law we're going to pass would stop that.
Mhm.
That's the basics.
Right. Yeah. So, are there any limitations on abortion in Idaho right now?
That's a trick question. Are we still killing babies?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I think there's not many limitations.
Okay. Are there other? Are you aware of other bills that have been run, or what happened to your bill last year, for example?
So last year we ran this bill, and this would end abortion. It's the Abortion Human Rights Act. Just to let you know, so Idaho says right now that a fetus is a baby.
Right.
And to kill a baby is murder, but we give an exemption to murder
Right.
for women or doctors that perform abortions.
Right. There's a non-prosecution clause that's been added to that.
So it's still murder.
Right.
We're just not prosecuting for it.
Right. So, for example, if someone kills a mother with child, they would be prosecuted for a double homicide, I presume.
Double homicide. That's actually happened in my district. A man killed a pregnant woman, and he's in jail now for a double homicide.
Right. So the unborn baby, according to Idaho code, is considered a human being.
Is considered a human being. So what
did he have a gun license? Because that would maybe count for some sort of license, wouldn't he?
Now you do.
Ouch. Ouch. So if this gets passed, so last year what happened?
Okay, so what happened last year is we introduced a bill. We worked on the language. We had a lot of pushback from, we'll just say, a pro-life group down there.
Mm-hmm. And Idaho Right to Life?
No, actually, it would be Idaho Chooses Life
Idaho
and David Ripley.
Okay. Yeah.
So we had a lot of pushback, and so we tried to tweak the language and, clean it, make it more palatable for them. But what we basically came to the conclusion is they don't want a law that ends abortion in Idaho. Mm-hmm. And so we decided we're just not going to compromise. We're going to end abortion. And so what this bill does, it just treats everybody the same under the law. It would just outlaw abortion. And so that's the bottom line. So last year we did not get to introduce it into committee. The head of Idaho Chooses Life talked to our chairman, did not want that bill presented. Mm-hmm. He pushed back considerably.
What committee is supposed to take up this kind of bill?
State Affairs.
State Affairs?
And
not the Health and
no, it's State Affairs.
Committee.
State Affairs deals with
criminal violations.
Yeah, criminal.
Okay.
And so we didn't completely push it last year because we want to we just wanted to introduce the topic. We wanted to have the conversations, and they wouldn't even let us have the conversations.
Right. In committee, because committee is just where you discuss, hey, what do we like about this bill? What do we not? Do we want to change it, or do we want to, and then do we want to pass it on to the floor?
Yeah, we were absolutely shut down.
Yeah.
You will not show this bill. And we were given all kinds of steps that we had to do, and they were unreasonable steps. And so,
and John, are you? How long have you been legislator?
Just this is my first term.
Okay,
I finished my first year. I'll be going into my second year.
Heather, how long have you been legislator?
I'm going on my fifth year.
Fifth year. Why did it take you so long to kind of start wanting to get involved in ending abortion in Idaho?
So I guess I didn't really. I felt like I was pro-life, but I don't know that I really understood what pro-life was until I met Scott. Mm-hmm. And Scott said, you cannot pass these other bills. They are still killing babies. And so until I dug into the law and realized, hey, we're already saying it's murder and we're allowing it.
Right.
It's just total injustice in the law. And so when I figured that out and actually it was brought to my attention, I'm like, Scott's like, well, this is the bill we should run. I said, absolutely, let's run it.
Yeah. So Scott, you just became legislator and you just jumped in.
This is not
John. John. There's too many Scotts in the room. I'm so sorry, John. John, you just became legislator and then you just jumped right into this fight.
Yes.
What's that been like? Because normally as a new legislator, you want to build relationships, make friends, consensus, unity.
How's that going for you? How's that going for you?
I don't have a reputation as a consensus guy in the legislature. So, as a matter of fact, one of the things that Heather brought up, the importance of these hearings is quite frequently that's the most fruitful debate that you have on a particular bill is during the hearing process because then
the committee process.
I'm sorry, the committee process, right. Because then you get to know everybody's real feelings and then you have public testimony. I was kind of shocked to learn that there's this notion throughout the legislature that we have to protect the members, which means some political topics are so hot that they want to not make you vote on them. And to the point that a lot of the, very frequently, they will ask you after you vote, do you want your no vote recorded? I was kind of shocked when I heard that because if you don't record your vote, how will your constituents know what you're doing? Yeah. And so, of course, every vote that I voted on is recorded.
So explain to me, what do they mean by protect your members? What do you mean by that? And eat that mic. Oh, you just took that mic off.
Go ahead, keep talking.
Okay. So protect the members just means if it's an issue that's a political hot potato that you're not quite sure where your constituency might be, you're not forced to vote in a way that, like you went on the floor where it's televised and everybody gets to see the tote and the tally board.
Okay.
You can kind of hide what your true feelings are.
Why can you hide that? I mean, isn't it supposed to be an open process?
It is an open process, but in the committees, especially if you vote no and it's not recorded, unless somebody actually listens to the transcript or happens to be listening live, they won't know how you voted.
So in committee, you can kind of bury the vote, but on the floor, you can't.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
And the committees are set up to protect the legislators because I don't get to vote on health and welfare. If something gets killed in health and welfare committee, I never have to vote on it.
Yeah.
Right.
If abortion gets killed in my committee, no one on the House floor. And that is the goal of the parties, is to protect their party members.
Kind of the opposite of being a public representative.
You bet.
Right? I mean, seems like the whole point. Oh man, my mic's falling apart. The whole point of this of having a representative is someone who actually is publicly accountable to their constituents and actually represents them, and so you know what they're voting on.
Well, almost every Republican says they're pro-life, but the question is, what does that look like?
Right.
What does
it mean
pro-life look like? What does it
practically?
mean?
Right.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
And
So if this, let's just do a couple of thought experiments here. Let's say, okay, let's say this time around, this term, God blesses it. It gets through committee. Let's say it even gets to the floor. Let's say beyond our wildest dreams, God blesses it and it passes. Isn't it going to be immediately struck down?
Go ahead, Scott.
Sure. I'll jump in. So
Will you bite?
when you
Somebody bite?
when you ask, is abortion available in Idaho, the answer is there are no substantial obstacles between a mother who wants to kill her child, her preborn child, in Idaho. And the reason there are no substantial obstacles is because that is what the federal courts have said. And some people think that abortion jurisprudence in the federal courts is Roe v. Wade and maybe Planned Parenthood versus Casey,
Right.
but it's actually about 37 Supreme Court decisions and denials of certiorari on a number of other
Right. The Supreme Court
Cases.
refusing to hear another case.
Absolutely. And in those refusals, sometimes they'll reiterate the jurisprudence that
Referring to
until
other cases.
viability, you cannot place any substantial obstacle between a woman and her abortion. So when you look at all of the pro-life efforts in the past, the federal court will say, as long as it doesn't place any obstacle, then you can do it, state.
Right.
And so the reality is nothing that we do, and a number of these pro-life bills that have been passed in Idaho will pass Supreme Court muster if there's any obstacle. So the answer to your question is, of course, if this bill passes, then Idaho will be sued in federal court by Planned Parenthood, possibly in state court as well, by anybody else. And that federal court is going to say you just violated our jurisprudence. And our position is your jurisprudence is not the law. You have broken the law by issuing opinions that are in contradiction to the Constitution of the United States and the state of Idaho.
Right.
So, and what's the play then? So we get, and what do you tell? I'm guessing a number of the legislators down in Boise, that's their point, or some of their question or their concern is, so Idaho's going to get sued for this. It's a surefire thing. What's the plan then?
Well, you have two options. Number one, you can show up in court, and it would be the Attorney General and his office representing the state of Idaho. And you can go ahead and show up in court, whether it's state court or federal court.
Yep.
Or you can just say, we're not going to show up in court, and that's a legitimate option as well. Now, if you show up in court and you go ahead and go through
You're recognizing some of their authority at some level.
Sort of, because
What if you wear like a Joker suit? Just like walk and show up. You could do that. Show up as a clown,
You can go through the process, and what will happen is Planned Parenthood would file for an injunction, and they'd probably file for a temporary injunction. And so within a couple of months of filing suit, the court, Beelin Windmill of the Idaho Federal Court, District of Idaho, he'll say, I'm going to enjoin you from enforcing your bill, your act, your law. And we could, at that point, Idaho could say, we don't care, we're going to enforce it anyway. Because the power is in our police power. It's the sheriff of Kootenai County, it's the prosecutor of Kootenai County, it's the municipal police departments that can go shut down these abortion mills and do prosecution.
It's not the lone judge.
Well,
nope.
Yeah.
And the thing is, are we going to act like a sovereign state or are we not? And if we're not going to do it for this, what makes you think our state's going to do it for guns?
Right.
Nobody cares about babies, but they care. Don't come for my guns.
Right.
But when the feds say we're coming for your guns, Is our AG going to stand up to that?
I was just reading yesterday.
We're going to get more into that.
We're going to get into that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
You don't want to.
Let's. I want to end the segment on this.
What?
I know. Dave's not here, so I got to figure out how to control time here. All right. I want to end here before we move on. What are the biggest hurdles right now in getting this legislation passed this coming year? John?
I think getting our colleagues on board to understand that not only is this the right thing to do morally, this is the legal thing to do to honor our sovereignty and our Constitution. Mm-hmm. And if for no other reason, they should be helping us.
Is there you mentioned the gun thing, and I know I'm kind of bringing that back, but just cool
just
it. Just
messed it up.
Cool. But, I mean, it seems to me like Idaho of all places, it seems like there would be a number of people concerned about state sovereignty issues. Is there any buy-in to that? I mean, you mentioned the gun thing. I'm also thinking about Obergefell, the definition of marriage being one man and one woman. That's an illegal decision that the Supreme Court has also foisted upon the states. I mean, how many states had a marriage definition in their constitutions?
I have to correct your language. The Supreme Court did not foist that on the states. When the Supreme Court renders an opinion, the states capitulate and act as if the Supreme Court has authority
made a law.
on the subject of
act
marriage.
as if Supreme Court made a law.
Exactly.
Okay, so we laid down. We
roll over like dead dogs is what we did.
Yeah.
Our AG did.
Yeah, but all of the states did that on abortion. All the states did that on a bunch of things. And all right, so just play the music. Just play the music.
Done.
When we come back, we got 2 more segments of all this. Hey, you do not play while I'm playing outro music.
Don't play any that are more than 4 seconds.
More on Cross Politics when we come back.
Worship is not our idea of trying to please a benevolent being. Worship ultimately is something that God Himself demands of His creatures.
Join us this January as we will enjoy fellowship, spiritual growth, and the worship of God at the 2020 G3 Conference. For information and reservations, visit g3conference.com.
That'll wake you up.
It's getting hot in here.
Metal.
Taking my sweater off.
It's about to get real.
Roll my sleeves up. There we go. Scott's been correcting me. He's been putting me right, putting me in my place. Hey, welcome back to Cross Politic on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. And just want a little shout out to our friends where?
The Ezra Institute guys.
Ezra Institute sent us Behold Your King, a family Advent guide. They send us copies, and I guess you can get your copies from Ezra Institute.
Yeah, and the thing I like about this is it's about 300 words for each day, just a little kind of exhortation.
So some Bible passages to read.
Yeah, some Bible passages to read, and then they give you a hymn, a carol to sing that day too.
It kind of goes with it.
And then some questions. Okay. So you can actually, I've been going through this with my kids.
Yeah.
Every year I have some sort of Advent thing I do with my kids. Last year was God Rest You Merry.
That's
by Pastor Doug.
That's Pastor Doug.
Hey, do you have one we can take home?
Sure, you can have mine.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
And
there we go.
It's a good way to shake up your Christmas Advent. That's all.
Man, this thing just falling
Is
over.
it doing it again?
It's just not staying up.
You're horrible.
We also have a live studio audience, so we want to hear from now.
Hey!
It's totally falling off. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm just going to be holding my mic by the end of this. Are you going to fix that? Talk about the connection with the guns. I mean, we were getting into that, and then Gabe so rudely cut us off. So what's the deal with guns?
Well, that's in state code 183315B. We passed SB 1332. I think it was 2015, Heather.
I think that's
it
when it
passed unanimously in the House and the Senate, and that whole bill was to defy the federal government if they try to pass something and issue a law. And it lists a whole bunch of things: administrative order, executive order, administrative rule. It gives a big list, and it says if the federal government tries to pass a law that infringes on the constitutional right to keep and bear arms, that Idaho will basically not enforce their law, except it specifically left out opinions of the judiciary.
Oh.
And so I'm calling them out on it because I know for a fact that if the federal courts issued some opinion against the right to keep and bear arms, that Idaho and Lawrence Wasden would roll over and capitulate completely. Completely.
I was reading yesterday, actually, in Virginia. The Virginia House of Delegates has a Democratic majority now, and they've come in and I think right off the bat just introduced a bill that makes it illegal, makes it criminal to not only carry, transport, or sell, I think it's, I don't know,
AR-15 or something
kind of guns, but to own the gun. And I was reading an article yesterday about how I think somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 or 40 counties have already in the last week passed or are in the process of passing county legislation that's basically creating sanctuary counties for the right to own these guns against the state. So their own state is trying to...
It's not even a state versus federal thing. It's a county versus state.
It's a county thing.
Yeah, interesting.
We've also talked to a couple of county sheriffs the last few months about red flag laws. Are you familiar with those?
Absolutely.
Yes.
They've tried to pass those in Idaho, and it almost passed, I think, last year and the year before. They're come that close, within 2 to 3 votes in the House, and it's going to go through.
Wow.
Well, and that was going to be in the Constitution of Idaho. That was the victim bill would do the same thing.
Yeah, Marcy's
Victims'
law.
Rights Bill.
Marcy law.
That's a red flag law.
Absolutely.
Marcy's law is a red flag law.
Yes.
How sneaky to call it Marcy's law.
Marcy. She's such a nice lady.
Because she was a victim.
Marcy.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Why the disconnect between, it seemed, I read the article about the Virginia counties and I'm thinking, okay, you'll do this for your guns.
Yeah.
What about for the babies?
Because I think society has told these women over and over, it's just a blob, just some cells. It's not a baby. We don't call it murder anymore. We call it abortion. Right. Abortion is murder.
Right.
And so we've desensitized ourselves that we're killing all these babies. Something I've been researching is go look up child sacrifice. Go look up the god of Moloch.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing.
In the Bible.
In the Bible, yeah.
Yeah, we read the Old Testament stories and we think, man, those people were so awful and bloody.
And we legalized it.
And no, but stop. We're doing that. Why were idols so attractive? I think we also just have this bad idea where people in the old days were just dumber than us. No, they were attracted to idols for the same reason that we're attracted to idols. They give power, respectability, influence, money, whatever. They offer sort of short-term wins at the price of the blood of your children.
Yeah,
and your soul, ultimately. So I want to push around a little bit just in terms of strategy here. And so you're running one bill. We are full throat supporter. We're going to cheer you on. We're going to probably talk to people down in Boise when you're going down there, and we're going to see what we can do to cheer you on. We've also heard that there's a heartbeat bill that's supposed to be presented as well. Yeah. Another representative is going to be supporting presenting a heartbeat bill in this next term in January. Can we run both?
Do you want to answer that, John?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, you said do I? I thought you said can I?
Nope. I've been talking too much.
Here's the problem, and I have had to apologize a lot of times because I got it. Not that I wasn't pro-life. I've been pro-life my entire life.
Right.
But I was what you would call a lukewarm pro-lifer.
Mm-hmm.
And what I came to realize after my first exposure to the abolitionist movement, which was a number of years ago in Texas, by the way, is that deep in the heart of Texas.
Just ruined his thought pattern there.
Sorry, keep going.
Is that this we're doing the same thing over and over again with these partial measures trying to save babies. Every one of these purportedly pro-life bills, the argument is going to save babies. And when point in fact, none of them have saved any babies. We have more abortions now than we ever have. And the trend is just going to continue to increase.
So is that true? I'm just stop you for a second. So I was just reading stats yesterday or the day before that said that the abortion rate has now dropped to at the same as or below what it was at when Roe versus Wade passed.
Well, it would depend on what data points you're using to determine the rate.
Right.
The actual number of abortions is up.
Is more. So they're talking about rate. Maybe because I'm reading articles, particularly from like hard leftists who are freaking out right now about the number, like 40 or I think 40 of the 50 states have passed more pro-life bills, and and we can talk about the relative helpfulness or usefulness of all of them, but I read some of these hard lefties and they're freaking out, and Trump's got 2 Supreme Court justices in now. I've got my doubts of exactly about how effective the Supreme Court is actually going to be, and I know that Roe versus Wade was decided by a Republican appointed majority of Supreme Court justice. I don't put my hope in all that, but at the same time, I also look at the way that they're freaking out, and I want to push back a little bit and say, so is it true to say we haven't saved any babies, that we haven't actually pushed back the tide at all with these laws?
Well, let me say something here. You haven't saved any babies and you haven't pushed back the tide. If your measurement is have we saved any, that should not be the measurement. In the United States Constitution and in the Idaho state constitution, our legislators, these 2 folks right here, and everybody else in government takes an oath to uphold the law of the land. It's irrelevant whether you save any babies. What's relevant is whether you upheld the law of the land. That's the question. And so these legislators that want to run a bill, which, by the way, will have no effect because every heartbeat bill that gets passed, because it's a judicial supremacist bill, they already know it's never going to take effect. So, of course, it's not going to save anybody.
Right.
But they are violating their oath, and that's the more critical thing. When we talk about the right to keep and bear arms, we talk about it is a God-given right to secure your own safety, even against your own government, period. That's obvious. It's obviously our God-given right to throw off our government should we see that as necessary.
But fully automatic weapons have been banned for like 70 years.
This is a good example of 1833-15B having no effect.
You just spoke in tongues.
That was an act.
You spoke in tongues.
I know, I hear you. I'm anointed by the Holy
Spirit. To the legislators.
We passed this bill that says we're going to intervene when the Congress passes a law, and then we have this law, and we have more than one on the books that we haven't done anything about.
So part of my point, though, is I'm thinking, I agree. I mean, I think, yes, the law of the land. At the same time, when you're in a food fight or a cat fight or whatever we're going to call it, where it's like, they're not playing by the rules. They've been ignoring the Constitution for over 100 years.
And we're talking conservatives have been ignoring the Constitution.
And so here we are, 120 years, 130 years at least into, or longer, really, of ignoring constitutional law. And you're in this food fight. I agree. We should be upholding the Constitution as much as we possibly can.
Well, then I'll jump in and say we have an obligation to God. Forget the Constitution.
Sure.
See, we're Christians.
Yeah.
If we're not going to stand up for the law of God,
sure.
See, our job is to tell what is government for. We're Christians. Our job is to tell government what they're for and hold them to account for it.
Right.
They are given a delegated authority by God to uphold the murder law, for one thing, that God passed when Noah got off the ark. He said, don't murder because everybody's made in my image.
Genesis 9:6. But
so we have to tell them that.
Here's the problem I have with that. I agree with you. The decretive word of God is very clear. Mm-hmm. But God also gives us all sorts of scenarios in the Old Testament where, Saul attacking David and going to kill David. David didn't just turn around to Saul and say, hey, thou shalt not murder. Like David was in this narrative and in this story and was being wise with the chips that were on the board.
Or you have a number of kings that are, you go through the kings and he was righteous and he was faithful, but he didn't remove the high places.
But John nailed it when he introduced his answer to this subject, that for 46 years we've experienced and experimented with the futility of pro-life laws. Look, here's your last 18 in the state of Idaho.
Okay.
They haven't saved anybody. This is over the last 10 years since 2010. So why are you going to do another one for 46 years?
I'll interrupt here, too.
Yeah, please.
So the heartbeat bill.
Right.
Who gets to define when life begins?
Well, God, of course.
No. Not in the heartbeat bill. It's man, because man says
when the heartbeat starts. That's what they're saying.
They're saying until the heartbeat,
or until we
and they're not even following,
until we can detect the heartbeat.
Yeah, and they're not even following their own science, because their own science says that when that's a fertilized egg, then life has begun.
The reason I like heartbeat bills not as the solution, but just as a tactic, is because I love that CNN has to say that a baby at 6 weeks has a heartbeat. Maybe as early as 6 weeks has a heartbeat. And they have to keep saying that. And of course, they're freaking out. And I see that as a rhetorical victory.
All of a sudden in New York,
Toby's a pastor.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
If we were killing pastors and a number of your cohorts were being killed,
Right.
would you be happy that CNN, and it was legal to do so and protected for
Right.
46 years, and your time was coming up, would you be content that CNN is just talking about the fact that you have a heartbeat? That's how you measure
No, but I wouldn't be content with that. But I would see that as actually a rhetorical
Winning.
victory. David, who's not here, Chalk and Knox, I'm going to give a shout out to you. I think he said this maybe to you before, but he said this on the show a number of times. He says if he's a slave in the 1860s or 1850s or whatever, and his master goes to the state house and says, I'm going to try to get freedom for you, and comes back and says, all I got was that the masters have to stop raping the women. He said, would I be thankful for that? Yes, I would. Now,
Yeah.
is that the solution?
But in
No.
pro-life bills, because of the Supreme Court, you don't even get that. You don't get anything. That's the whole point. You do all these exercises, and all you get is the rhetoric on CNN.
Here's
That's
the
all
deal.
you
So,
get.
So
That's
hang on.
it. That's all you get.
Let me bring this conversation
You
back
don't
to
understand.
a
That's
point.
it.
Well,
For
but-
46 years.
I don't-
That's
no, no,
it.
so I don't think that's true.
Let me
I don't
hop
think
in
that's
here.
true.
Let me hop in
Because I
here.
can
First
point
of
at
all,
the bills.
I wish I could
Planned
whistle.
Parenthood organizations have gone in half since the 90s.
Yes.
All right. So there's a number of actually statistical realities that the pro-life movement has had some wins.
Okay, you say
Okay.
they've gone in half?
Yes.
No, actually, Planned
the
Parenthood.
number of locations.
So let me explain what's actually happened. The number of small abortion mills has reduced. And instead, they've built super huge abortion centers. Just go to Houston.
Some have. Yeah, some
No,
have.
Planned Parenthood. Let me
I'm not
explain.
disagreeing
what
with you on that
Planned
point.
Parenthood has done is they've used abortion regulations to basically out-compete the competition. They do 1/3 of the abortions in the United States. And
Certainly.
if you look at their profitability
Certainly.
and their market share, they're using government to gain market share.
Certainly.
And to do better abortions.
Yep.
And
Nope.
they do.
Um,
and so Planned Parenthood is highly profitable because we play this game.
No, I'm not disagreeing on that point. Secondly, ultrasounds have been shown and known to prevent and change mothers' decisions before they go and have an abortion.
Yeah, but
That's
remember,
a pro-life win. Now,
Right.
hang on, Scott.
No.
Hold on. I'm
Yes,
not done yet.
I
I'm not done
agree.
yet. Hold on.
Let Gary
Right.
finish.
Lastly, in all this, and so what legislation? So I'm with you guys on the end abortion stuff, but what legislation has the end abortion movement passed? Zero, nothing, zilch. The pro-life movement, for all their faults, for all their problems, has passed legislation that has helped in some form or another, and it's also caused harm in some states and some there's but they have saved or changed the narrative in a way that the abolitionist movement has not.
I would disagree with you that they've saved anybody. First of all, you bring up a good point about the ultrasounds. One of the things that we hear complaints on, and this goes back to the abolitionist groups, showing these very graphic images. Those images have impact. Now, I saw one of those signs. I thought, oh, this is disgusting. I shouldn't see this. I shouldn't look at this. But that sign wasn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
But if that sign has, and I know those signs have had effects on people that were contemplating abortion, it's the same with the ultrasound. Not that those are not good measures. They are, but they're not incremental. They're people doing their best to try to convince, usually one-on-one, some other human being not to kill their child. And for that, we should applaud them. However, the problem with this issue that we're talking about, the incrementalism, is we have this notion we're going to pass this partial measure. We're going to save a few. Heather brought up a good point about when does life begin, when the heartbeat starts or at conception. And that's the problem. We have this idea that if we have a heartbeat bill, it will save babies, but we're not going to change what we do as far as the law. They are not going to combine the heartbeat bill with the exercise of sovereignty. The abortion of human abortion in Idaho absolutely must be coupled with a full and complete immediate exercise of state sovereignty that our law our civil law reflects the natural law, and we're going to enforce it.
What if was it Tammy Nichols who introduces this heartbeat bill? What if she included, I don't know if she would, state sovereignty measure in a heartbeat bill and said, and if any courts tries to give an injunction to this law, we instruct all of our lesser magistrates to ignore it, and we grant you immunity to it all. What if they did that for a heartbeat bill?
Then I'd tell them they should run the abolition bill, because if they're going to do that, why are they going to still let some babies die? That'd be stupid.
If they
so,
want-
frankly,
Well, because here's the part of the problem is Southern Idaho is highly Mormon. And if hang on, hold on. Let me bring this conversation back to a point. Secondly, what if And so you have this whole
I didn't know that.
church. News to me. And they would be more likely to go for that than they would for the abolitionist bill. Now, here's why I am for running both, is because I think the abolitionists are playing a very important role in this last 2 years.
Yeah.
You guys have pushed the narrative right where it should be.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now
abortion is murder.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to end abortion. I mean, how many states are now talking about abortion? How many pastors do you now see going around the U.S. preaching end abortion at their local abortion mill now? It's a movement that is never.
But even the pro-life, the mainstream pro-life, thinks that heartbeat bills are extreme. Like they think like we're going radical now.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, because it used to be like
they're now pushing heartbeat bills because of you guys.
And I think that's thanks to the.
Well, these pro-life groups, I'm just so disappointed what I've seen in Idaho. I mean, I think they're truly concerned about more money than they are money and supporters and to keep themselves going.
I think there can be truth to that. I definitely can identify where I'm disappointed with the pro-life movement. One of the things
we've had them on our show.
We've gotten into them.
And we've called them out.
Yeah. And what I don't want to happen in here, because I think it's a little disingenuous for us to say that the pro-life movement has done nothing. Because we've been silent for 40. The abortion movement has been silent for 40 years.
That's not even true, because
you got Rescue Operation America. I know, but they've not had a big voice. They're working on it. It's coming alive. But the problem is we sit here. I've had friends in the pro-life movement, not Catholics, in all this, and I disagree with Catholic theology. But if Catholics had not been there in the 80s, there would have been no resistance at all from the church in all this.
The Roman Catholic lady that ran our Right to Life organization locally since Roe versus Wade just handed it off to a couple of young couples in our church, who and you think she's been walking this for whatever 40 years,
yeah.
And I don't want to throw her under the bus, even if I think tactically there could have been better moves along the way, and some of it wasn't as important as maybe they thought.
Yeah.
I mean, we sit on their shoulders. They've been laboring, praying, standing in front of the clinics, doing the Walk for Life.
When we have not.
Okay, well, but I want to separate a couple things for you. So we have the legislative realm, and then we have the realm of what do we do?
Citizen movement
while
kind of stuff. Yeah.
Abortion is legal, and there are abortion clinics, and we need to help. Mm-hmm. We need to try to turn people away from killing their children, and we need to be an assistance to people.
Yep.
Those are. I want to help you guys, try to get you guys to divide the two.
Yeah.
When we talk about the role of government, that's different than trying to save babies on the street. And so I think there you can run all plays, but in the government, our job as Christians, you got to understand, when we talk about idolatry is not just having a god called Molech, it's also having a god called I want to save a few babies.
Yeah, right.
Our job is to put God first, which is that we obey God and we do everything that God has commanded, and we go and disciple the nation in that. That's our job. Our job is to tell them what God requires.
Right.
Yes.
I agree with that, but godly politicians also have to exercise wisdom, and that means
Daniel and Babylon.
You have situations where Solomon has the two prostitutes fighting over the baby, and there's not he's got to exercise wisdom and figure out how do I get from here to there. That's what a godly magistrate also does, and says.
Well, but Solomon was an absolute ruler, and that was more of a principle. Solomon could dictate the truth anytime.
As a Christian legislator,
no, he couldn't.
Legislator, I'm just asking for my side to be heard.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're basically shutting me down, saying we don't even want to hear it.
Right,
and that's what's not fair.
Yeah, and that's horrible.
One more question, just about another possible play in all this. So back to the Mormon thing. There's tons and tons of Mormons, Southern Idaho. According to Mormon law or whatever their rules, abortion is prohibited except for exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. Okay, I don't agree with those exceptions at all. Period. But what about a bill that said abortion is banned except for rape, incest, life of the mother, with also an injunction for the courts and immunity for those who defy the courts? What about a bill like that to get Mormons to sign on?
I'll say this. We're looking at this through the baby's eyes. We're not looking at it through the mother's. It's not looking at it. We're looking at it to protect life. We're not looking at it to make somebody feel better about their choices.
Sure.
It's about the life of the baby. That's what the difference with our bill is. It has nothing to do with the mother. It has everything to do with the baby.
Toby's question is basically saying, if you had the ability to end 99% of abortions in Idaho, would you vote for that bill?
I'll tell you, if you have the ability to end 99% of abortions in Idaho, then you have the ability to end 100%.
No,
yes, you do.
Because there's Mormons.
Yes, you do.
Southern Idaho is highly Mormon.
When you give a politician something
you don't
easier
have
to
them,
do,
buddy.
they will take it every single time.
I need to interrupt here, first of all.
Do it.
Get in here, John.
First of all, because we mentioned her name a couple of times, Tammy Nichols.
Yeah.
Tammy belongs to the LDS Church. She is a solid liberty legislator. I know from my conversations with Tammy, that if she could end abortion tomorrow, she would do it. But I also know that within the LDS community, they're not all in agreement on this to have these exceptions.
Okay.
We already have some that are solidly with us. We have some that are not.
Okay.
But it's more than just the religious people, even if they're non-Christian.
Yeah.
This issue has to transcend God on a legal level. I'm very blessed in that my district is overwhelmingly Christian.
Yeah.
But that's not the case for the United States entirely.
Or even most of Idaho.
Yeah. We're approaching close to 50% of people that maybe if they give lip service to God, probably don't have any real belief.
Right.
But this issue, one of the most eloquent pro-life apologies I ever heard was from an atheist. And I can maybe explain that after the break.
All right.
We'll do that.
Wow.
Man, he knows his game right there.
You just start playing the music
After the break.
I don't usually stop. I just keep going until I'm done.
I know the comments on Facebook and YouTube are blowing up right now.
Yeah, right.
More from Cross Politic when we come back.
Love all of you. Love all of you.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I can tell you for sure after 25 years in this business is people hate to be sold, but they love to be taught. I put this course together because I want you to know how to see what other people miss. Our goal is to become a professional. Now, let me be really clear what I mean by a professional. Everybody can tell you what happened, but a professional can tell you why. They've assessed the situation, they've seen what happens, but they can see things. They understand the dynamics between the variables so that they can manipulate the variables to get a very different outcome. Diagramming sales calls is by far one of the most important sales calls you can deliver if you're going to be elite. Right off the get-go, you've got to come in, you've got to blow their doors off, you've got to do a great job. You've got to show them you know what you're talking about, and it's got to work. I want to talk to you about the business of forgiveness. What do we do in those really tough situations? Everybody wants a secret to success. They're not secrets. They're there to be seen. It's just, how do I see it? How did you see it? How did he see it? How did she see it? Always remember this. Product positioning is not making something easier to sell. It's making it easier to buy. Alvin Toffler has this great saying. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can't read and write. It's going to be those people who can't unlearn, learn, and relearn. I'm Jason Elmore. Join me in becoming elite.
Oh, man.
Hey-ya!
This will wake you up.
Welcome back to Cross Politic. We're having fun talking end abortion in Idaho. We got Scott Herndon in the studio with us. Representative Heather Scott. Representative,
John Green.
Josh.
John. We're butchering. It's Scott.
Sorry.
It's Josh.
Too many first names in this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We're gonna start calling you Andrew. That's the next. Before we get to John Green, we're just gonna Andrew.
Bill, Fred,
Yeah.
Tom. How does the Dred Scott case fit into this, Heather?
So that's when states stood up and said, no, black people are humans. They are citizens.
So that was a Supreme Court ruling.
And the Supreme Court said, no, they're not.
Yeah,
and,
they don't have a standing in federal courts in the United States.
And the state said, yeah, we think otherwise, and this is how we're going to treat them in our state.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we're trying to look at babies. Yeah, they're humans.
Right.
And so we're going to treat them like humans in Idaho.
Right.
That's all we're trying to do is just treat them like humans in Idaho.
Right.
Has nothing to do with rape or incest or mothers or committee hearings. It's like they're kids. They're babies.
So One of the things we want to talk about a little bit is how in the world did we get here as a culture? We've murdered over 60 million babies in the name of choice.
This doesn't happen by accident.
Well, how did we get here?
1 degree off. Just a little bit of sin. You just open that door. Next thing you know, that's why we can't stop at the heartbeat bill.
Of course
it's
not.
just a little bit. It allows man to define.
And don't misunderstand us. Our interest in running other places is not because we'd be happy with and satisfied with any of those. We want it all gone. Period. Complete.
Yeah,
so don't misunderstand. But so what does that look like? What are the 1 degrees of sin that we've given into?
Well, I mean, so you bring up a good point. When Gallup polls people every year since Roe v. Wade, they've done a consistent polling. And most Americans, number one, support abortion being legal. And I'm talking 80% when you talk about incest and rape.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. 75, 80%.
Yeah.
Now, when they're challenged, and this is the problem, when you talk about the moral argument and you really push the moral argument, which our legislature has the constitutional right to do, it's in your Article 3, legislative department. But when you talk about the moral argument, that's when you convert people. But Washington State, so before Roe v. Wade, you had a lot of things leading up, sexual revolution. You had a lot of things that led up to Roe v. Wade. The undoing of the Comstock laws, a 1965 Supreme Court case about contraception.
Okay. Is that the Comstock laws?
The Comstock laws were from the late 1800s, had to do with contraception, right? So then you had a 1965 Supreme Court case, Griswold versus Connecticut, or the other way around. Anyway, Washington State in 1970 actually passed a voter referendum legalizing abortion in early term.
Right.
In the 1990s, Washington State passed a ballot initiative that basically said if Roe v. Wade got reversed, if the Supreme Court reversed, Washington's going to keep their most liberal abortion laws.
Right.
It's a problem with the
New
people.
York. New
There's
York
a demand.
Too, now.
And when you talk about legislators and governments not wanting to undo this, they're probably, and you talk about the Mormon Church and other churches and regular people, they're trying to cover their own sin. 40% of people or women, by the time they're done with their reproductive age, have probably gotten an abortion.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's most of the people in these churches, most of the people in government. And it's not most, but it's a good percentage. And then, of course, a number of people are related to them.
Right.
And abortion covers up sin, right? It covers up.
It tries to.
Pedophilia. It covers up a guy in the church having an inappropriate relationship with a girl in the church.
Yeah.
So this is, if you don't think that's part of it, a guy in government having an inappropriate relationship with someone else in government.
Yeah.
So here's my concern, the moral concern I have about end abortion legislation, which I'm for and I want to see happen. But we have judges who are presiding over the murder of 1,400 children a year here in Idaho, and then we pass end abortion legislation, and then January 1st, those same judges are going to somehow be able to preside over the distinction if this girl murdered her baby, or if this girl was forced into murdering her baby, or if this girl was a 13-year-old brought by her pedophilia,
But there's a lot of steps before it gets before the judge.
I agree with you on that. I'm just saying is all of a sudden we're going to flip this switch and all of a sudden be able to judiciously be able to judge on these situations. That's not how the Bible talks about these things.
Honestly, I don't think this switch is going to just flip out of the blue.
Right.
When we put forward God's standard, the Holy Spirit of God is going to move even upon heathens to do the right thing as far as in the legislature and the government.
Right.
The governor's going to have to stand up. Brad Little's going to have to stand up and really push this bill in order for it to be successful. Prosecutors are going to have to repent in order to bring cases related to this bill before judges ever capitulate. By the way, I think this was Tim Remington's concern that he was really expressing at Candlelight, that you're now going to ask judges to judge rightly. How's that going to happen? A move of the God,
work of the Holy Spirit.
That's really good,
frankly.
Scott. Because and I think that's a really helpful way of framing all of this. Is this is one prong, and it's an important prong, legislative prong. But you've got the people on the sidewalks ministering at the clinics. You got people doing websites and conferences, but you also have the gospel going forth in all of this, and all of it has to be driven ultimately by God's work.
With regard to these legal issues, now asking these judges to judge rightly, I think because of how our legal system works, that's really not even an issue. We turn a switch on and off every year when we make changes in the legislature. there's an effective date to a new law. And from that point forward, the law operates according to what the legislature has passed. But as far as the judges go, to the point that they are really just the referees of a legal proceeding, they're not the ones that are really judging. Ultimately, especially for this issue, I would envision that in most cases, as an experienced criminal defense lawyer, I would say, this is an issue I'm going to want to go to a jury. Mm-hmm. Right. Now, that's where you have to have a change of hearts.
Right.
And there are a lot of mitigating issues that come into play when you're determining the course of action for a prosecution, which brings me to another point I wanted to go back to real quickly.
Go for it.
We have to change our tactics a little bit. Last year, when Heather and I first started, twisting the arms of our colleagues to try to get them on board, probably the most prevalent explanation for why they didn't want to support us was because they're worried about prosecuting mothers for having those abortions.
Right.
And so we put our heads together, Scott and Heather and I, and we came up with what we thought was a solution for that would pretty much take that issue off the table, which is, in the case of an abortion, the mother would not be prosecuted if she cooperated with the prosecution to testify against the doctor. And then, so we put that into the bill, that language into the bill, and all of a sudden, the people that were objecting before, well, no, we're still not going to go with you. So it was kind of a false, position on their part.
I appreciate that. That's I think that's helpful. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the reason why that's helpful, though, is also thinking about the cultural nature of this sin. I mean, we all have blood on our hands. I mean, whether it's actual like family members or people in our family or churches or whatever. But
as a society, as a church.
But as you're noting, Scott, I mean, there is demand for this blood, and the demand is driven by our sin. We want to live in ungodly ways. We want to live in lawless ways, and then we want to try to cover our tracks and cover our sin. And so, how many men are using porn regularly? I mean, pornography is a multi-billion-dollar industry that rides on the back of the abortion industry. I mean, it demands that women be living in a way in which they would be required to murder their babies.
Right.
And you click on that image, you click on that link, and you're saying
you're clicking on that demand.
You're voting for that kind of society.
Right.
And we're not going to end abortion while we still have that kind of that kind of licentiousness, that kind of lust driving us. The two can't. They go together.
Right. One of the things that we've made the connection on in our show is that abortion came after parents started kicking their kids out of worship service into the secondary little kid service, while the real worship happens over here. So parents go over here and worship while the kids go to some sort of Sunday school kind of thing, and then 50 years later,
kids if you have children.
Exactly, you did it. And so there's a talking about 1 degree away. We started off with this little sin, and where we thought we were actually doing something good.
Well, not only did we take them out of church and say, you're not really Christians, you're not really with us in the faith, but then we sent them off to the government schools and said, would you please disciple our children? Right. So, I mean, we did it. It was a double move.
Right. That's right.
And so we were despising our children. I mean, tons of Christians doing it. We weren't, and then a real thoughtless just acceptance of birth control culture. Of
no fault divorce.
I mean, Margaret Sanger kind of came up with this, the founder of Planned Parenthood, and a bunch of Christians just sort of like, oh, okay, I guess children are optional.
Yep.
And in a real thoughtless way, not thinking like Christians. And so is it any wonder that our culture has learned to despise the image of God in unborn children?
Well,
because the church taught them first.
And if we go back to the bill, or they always say for rape and incest, it's okay to abort.
Right.
Well, that is the crime. I mean, that is proof of the crime.
Right.
Rape and incest is a crime. We act like it's the mother's fault, so she has to get rid of the proof. But that is on the rape and the incester.
Right. I was like how our pastor Doug Wilson likes to put it is, I don't think that we should punish one of the victims for the crime. Right. The baby is a victim, and the baby is another one of the victims. And so when in any other crime do we punish one of the victims?
Well, so one of the things you're talking about is that there's rot throughout society. I think this year that transgender inmate in the Idaho.
Oh,
He just got his first prep surgery. Yes.
Right. Now, this is another court opinion that came down that said you will obey and you will give this guy this thing. And then Brad Little made maneuvers saying, hey, man, we're not going to do this. We're going to appeal.
We're going to stand up.
We're going to go ask the higher federal court. But, of course, we're going to capitulate. But we capitulate on everything.
Right,
and that's sort of the point of this bill is to not capitulate. You got to draw the line on everything. One of the things that one of those pastors up in Coeur d'Alene really cares about is that we have anti-fornication, adultery laws, and we're not enforcing those. We don't enforce anything righteous.
People to positions.
Right.
Mm-hmm. For performing that.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Sorry. I digress. Cut that out.
But this is the point. We have abandoned righteousness. And so we need to call for righteousness in every aspect of life and government. And that's what we're doing with this bill.
I thought about running a bill back on marriage again. I mean, think about court overreach. I mean, we all just fell over with Obergefell.
Just limp.
I mean,
what would you run? Because our Constitution says a marriage between a man and woman is the only domestic legal union that shall be recognized.
So I think a law that instructs the state to cease any compliance with Obergefell.
Well, actually, I've got a better one on that one.
Okay.
So I think we're going to see a bill, and you guys need to support it, and it'll be to eliminate marriage licensing, and instead we'll just go ahead and still record the marriages with your local county recorder. You still have to meet the constitutional requirement, man and a woman, like that's presumed because that's in the Constitution. But we're not going to license it. So you're not going to go get a grant of permission from the state to go ahead and get married. You solemnize the marriage like usual.
Could homosexuals go and register their marriage though? With
sure, I'm sure that it's a county recorder. If you love freedom and liberty,
but that doesn't really.
I'm just wondering what that does.
The government's getting out of the marriage business. They're not supposed to be there anyway. Now you've stepped into a realm that the government never had authority in the first place, except to enforce the adultery laws. And frankly, if you really do, we have anti-homosexual sex laws? I don't even know if we have those on the books right now.
Right.
But you certainly have the constitutional.
But here's the one correction
against such a thing.
Here's the one correction: is that the government, you're right, is they accept the definition that God handed down in the Word of what marriage means, but the government still needs to be involved in the witness of a marriage because
there's property and inheritance and divorce.
But that's where the recording comes into
which
is great. Which
so
is great.
You have a recorded marriage.
A government should not preside over the divorce of a homosexual couple
because the marriage doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Sure.
Right, but that's why the government needs to be concerned about the definition of what's going on, because then the government has to preside over polygamy, divorce,
but we have it in the highest
divorce.
laws of the land in the Constitution, so it's already there.
It's already there. Right.
Yeah. Turns out we just need to obey it.
Yeah, that's life is there first before you ever get to the marriage thing in Article 3. So
if we compromise on life, why not on marriage? And
you talk about guns.
You talk about that
securing
1 degree.
Safety. That's
if we can't get the very first article right with life,
the very first section in the very first article, we don't even get that right. Yeah. When we compromise on guns, that's the very first section of the very first article.
Right.
Sadly, the driving force behind a lot of this. Of course, it's another sin issue, but is not so much the issue itself, but it's the money. We talk about the abortion, it's the money. Agreed. When you talk about the marriages, who benefits from all the marriage failures and the divorces? I'm sorry, but the family law bar.
The lawyers.
And,
I knew it. I liked you about the Texas thing.
But I unfortunately did practice some of that. I hated it. And it's the only time in my life I'd ever asked God for money. I said, if you'll give me something, I'll never do another divorce. The very next day, I settled a case I'd been litigating for 8 years. I've never done a divorce since.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it really seems like in this whole conversation, I mean, we're trying to push a material law on a spiritual people that are blind and really don't want it. Idaho doesn't want an abortion.
Well, I kind of disagree. There are actually a lot of people in Idaho that want to end abortion.
Sure, I'm just saying just like
majority.
I don't know if it's majority because we got to get a vote to find out if it's the majority.
And that's the problem. If we don't allow a vote in committee, we don't know the people that represent us where they stand.
Really stand on it or not.
Absolutely. That just seems I think that's the thing that we need to really go blaring at these people.
Why can't we even talk about it?
Why can't we just at least have a vote?
Well, and I will tell you this. Last year, we went spiritual. We decided to pray for the committee chairman. We prayed for him. We've asked God to open his eyes. Yeah. And we didn't put a lot of pressure. I mean, John and I would stop in and talk to him and that, but I mean, we knew we were hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of people praying for him that he will at least allow the bill to be heard. And that's what I guess would ask your listeners, if they could just pray in January, allow the bill to be heard.
Is there some sort of resolution that we could pass that would say, what Idaho needs is reformation and revival in the church? You see what I'm saying? Like let's.
No, they wouldn't even vote to protect Christians.
Exactly.
Last year, we tried to get a resolution that said, we just want to bring attention, the Christian persecution, and say we're against it. Yeah. And it got voted down.
In the House.
In the House.
Voted down. The resolution.
In the conservative
Everyone
House.
should look up their legislators. It seems like voted on that
It seems
one.
like we should also be pushing some sort of spiritual resolution every year. Like that, like Reformation and Revival, because we've already come to the conclusion, like we want to end abortion, but we recognize the first problem is a spiritual problem, one degree off, in our sin. But to get Idaho to recognize that our biggest problem is spiritual, I think would be pretty significant.
Yeah. And you can't, but at the same time, I mean, pressing on these practical issues, you can't talk about them in a way that divorces it from the spiritual realities. I mean,
I want to come back to talking about that spiritual reality and the power of prayer, that it does move God. Arlene, my wife, is in the studio, and we prayed for Steve Harris before our September conference, and he came. So we had a conference on this bill.
Who's Steve Harris?
He's the chairman of the State Affairs Committee.
Okay.
He is the guy that we need to give us a hearing.
Okay.
So we prayed. People prayed for him. Arlene prayed specifically for him. She made a call to him, and then our whole family prayed for him, and he showed up at our conference.
Praise
so
God.
Huge.
God
Praise
does
God.
move, and
Praise
that's
God.
what we need.
Yeah. Amen. So what's the plan this January? When does the term start, and what's the plan?
It starts January 6th.
Okay.
And the plan is we probably will contact the chairman this month and talk to him about this before we get down there.
Okay.
So I don't know. We'll play it by ear, but we're going to try to get a hearing and try to have the conversation. So when you introduce a bill, you basically bring it in front of the committee and say, I'd like to get a bill number.
Right.
We'd like to get a bill number. Then you get a hearing.
In the committee.
In the
Then it goes to
committee.
Yep.
And what our big deal is, we like to have the discussions, and we don't want to turn it into a circus down there. And I think the circus would happen more if they don't allow us to have a hearing. And if they let us have a hearing, I don't think it'll be a circus. Yeah. I really don't.
And if it has a hearing, then the committee votes whether or not to push it on to the actual floor of the House, the State House.
Yes.
Okay, that's the process. And what can Idaho listeners in particular, what can we do?
I think the biggest thing you can do is make sure you understand the difference of this bill and any other bill. The name of this bill is the Abortion Human Rights Act. And the difference is it just completely outlaws abortion in our state. Yeah. End of story.
Right.
So there's no, I mean, you have to understand that it takes a different approach to abortion than any other bill.
Does your law include language regarding the courts or defying Roe versus Wade or any of those kind of things?
It does. It does include a section in the bill that does say that we are going to defy the courts and the federal judiciary if they are opposed to this law.
Yeah.
John, you got anything to wrap up here?
Andrew, Tom, Fred? I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry.
My grandchildren never forget my name.
That's all that matters.
Just to kind of follow up on what Heather said, as Idahoans and as liberty-loving Americans, we should know our state government. You should know whether your representative is on the State Affairs Committee.
Yeah.
And if you have a representative that's on the State Affairs Committee who's been campaigning as a pro-life Republican, there is not a more pro-life bill than the abolish human abortion bill. And you need to put pressure on your state rep to say, we want this heard, we want to vote.
Yeah.
I'll tell one thing they can do. Go to our website, abolishabortionid.com. We have a petition that pops up on the screen. If they could sign it, they'll get on our email list too, and that way we can call them to action, tell them who to contact,
As
when
needed.
to contact, etc.
Yeah.
So that's abolishabortionidaho.com.
ID,
abolishabortionid.com. Elect repjohngreen.com, repheatherscott.com if you guys want to follow up on what they are doing. I guess I'll just end it here. Make sure you guys join the club. We will see you next time. Love God, love your family, baptize your babies, fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politic.